Hello, welcome to the Carousel Podcast. Today I'm joined by Kevin Dolan, who goes by Bennett's Phylactery on Twitter. You've probably seen him. He is a fantastic leader of our thing and our space, and he's the man behind the Exit Group, which is an organization that helps right-leaning men thrive outside our totalitarian corporatocracy, which is something I have a ton of experience about, and he and I have chatted about this before. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think you're the perfect figurehead for elements of our movement because you were fired from a very fancy job after being doxxed. And that happened about a year and a half ago, I think. And what I found most fascinating about this was in Alex Kashuta's podcast, you referred to the people who doxed you as a ring. You said like the ring had been active for a while. So we'll get to that just in just 1 second, but I also just want to get out that you are a Mormon. And part of the reason why you kind of came to the fore was that you were a leader of a movement called the Desnat movement, which is just a Twitter movement. People, of course, framed it like it's this insane, like blow up thing, but it's not at all. It's just a bunch of people like us, like asking questions on the internet. That's all it is. So
people are gonna be mad if I don't correct you on me being a leader of the movement. That's gonna be very funny to the guys.
What are you?
I mean, it was a hashtag. It was a hashtag.
It was a
hashtag. And like there were some guys who got like big heads about what that meant, but ultimately it was like a group chat and a hashtag, and they made memes. So I guess I would deflate that image in your mind a little bit.
Totally.
But no, I mean, yeah, it was me and a bunch of friends and who met on Twitter, and basically what happened is like a couple of our guys really pissed off some people, and eventually attracted the ire of, fair to say, a ring, a doxing ring. I mean, it was all of the big Antifa accounts that you would expect to pump something like that. Everybody was involved in pumping it, and it was definitely not just targeting me. It was targeting like a dozen people, and they very clearly had connections to, I mean, there's certain journalists, both here and abroad, that are at every single one of those Antifa protests in Portland and are very clearly affiliated with those people, even though they would deny any explicit affiliate. I mean, they would deny that it's even a thing. They would say Antifa is just anybody who hates fascism. Which is, PR obviously, but a coordinated attack on several people. That's what I mean by a ring. And they had a website that had, pictures of me, pictures of my wife, pictures of my kids, pictures of my house, and it was pretty scary for a minute. And but it wasn't just me. It was a lot of people. And basically what I decided to do, I had a lot of people reach out to me and say, what can we do to help you? And some of them, I probably could have taken any of half a dozen opportunities from because I was a data scientist. So I was lucky that I had the data science, maybe not so hot now, but back then you could get a data science job. And I thought, instead of me just taking one of these opportunities, what if I bring this group of people who want to help? Because, some of them wanted to help me in particular, but some of them were just mad about this issue, right? Mad about the fact that people couldn't speak their minds. And I said, what if we brought these people together to start helping each other and helping each other preemptively, proactively, so that we just don't have to. And cancel culture is like not what this is about. It's about being beholden to people who despise you.
Yeah.
and whose values are totally contrary to your values. And one of the mechanisms by which that hurts people is, yeah, you can lose your job for things you say on Twitter, but it affects every dimension of your life.
Yeah.
When your ability to get food and your ability to get health care and all of these things are dependent on people who want to destroy you and brainwash your kids.
Yeah.
That's what we're up against.
Well, you and I are both working on different projects that are attempting to provide an economic backbone to the disaffected men of our society. And, if you look at the electoral map of young men, particularly married men, it's like 100% Trump. It's like if you look at what the electoral map would look like if it was, just men voting. And so it's like we have this society that democratically, obviously, we are not happy with, and obviously, certainly causes us a great deal of anguish and harm. And nowhere is that more felt than the workplace. So, reading this exposure document, there must be some like communist era word for this, like blacklist paper or something. Like it's this paper. So it's on exposed desnat, DEZNAT.noblogs.org. And it's
don't give him the link. Don't give him play. Come
sorry. Well, no, I'm just saying, like, yeah, I don't want to
not for me.
For
Because
the other
I'm easy to
people.
find.
Yeah, sure.
There's other people. So
Okay,
yeah.
no, sorry. I don't go there, but let me just tell you what it says on this thing is so, like, well, in preparing for this episode, what I wanted to say is I think we experience you talk a lot about God and meaning. I think we experience the like results of evil a lot. We see chaos a lot, right? Which can be a result of evil. Chaos can also not be a result of evil. But we see, like when I go to downtown LA and I see the homeless people, they have a certain like order to them, even though they are chaos, right? It's like they always do the same things. They always I can always see their butt crack. They're never wearing a belt. They're always screaming. And so like, why are they always doing these same things? So I think that's chaos, and people mistake chaos for evil a little bit. When I'm looking at this thing that was written about you, I get this overwhelming feeling that I'm looking at evil. Just because of the way it's written and the way it's lying about you. It is a sheet full of lies about you designed to harm you. You know what I mean? It's like it has. First of all, you said somewhere else that they told you about this beforehand just to like hold it over you, like just to like hurt you and like make you afraid.
Yeah, just to stretch out the torture, I guess.
Yeah.
But I mean, what it actually did is gave me time to prepare. I mean,
right.
Miscalculation on their part, but no, I mean, watching what it did to my wife.
Yeah.
She's a little bit too pure for this world, and to see somebody say those things about me was really, that was tough on her. She actually she stayed up like all night that night replying to my haters on Twitter.
That's good though. That's a good way.
Yeah, no, she's
Hello. Uh-oh.
Of like going to bed at night knowing that there's a tiger in the jungle. And because what I didn't know, I mean, I knew I was going to get fired. Like, I can get fired. That's fine. I didn't know, because like the guy, the one of the journalists that's connected to these Antifa guys, like he prepared a report for German intelligence, and my name is on that. And so it's like, it's like how who is involved in this, and how bad do they want to hurt me?
But so that's just so first of all, there's all sorts of personal details about you in here. They're also just straight up telling lies. So there's one part in here that I just want to highlight where they say, under the perceived safety of anonymity, is when Kevin Dolan's racist views really come to light. Dolan views certain races as scourges or forces of evil. And then they're talking about this tweet that you made that literally says something that is like completely not racist at all. I'm trying to like pull it up right now, but I'm having like internet problems. But I just want to show like, okay, it said the tweet that you had was not enough talk in the church about scourges, forces of evil who nonetheless have a divine commission to punish hubris. The Assyrians, the Romans, the Lamanites, the Mongols, the Spaniards, Yoko Ono, which is hilarious. To resist these destroyers without repenting is to fight against God. No fucking person, frigging person on earth reads that and thinks you're racist. Not it's obviously a joke. You're throwing in
it's
like what
it's
like,
anti-Italian discrimination,
it's
as
like
they
right.
say.
Oh, the Spaniards. You're going after the Spaniards. Like we all need to be really worried. So like the fact that they would write that on a piece of paper and try to destroy you with it is just straight up like elemental historical satanic like witch hunt like totalitarian like Orwell type evil to me. Like, and I it's just so rare to read something like this. So I guess what I want to ask is like, do you really think this is just a random group of Antifa people, or is this like funded by somebody bigger than that?
And we live in exciting times. I really have no idea. And that was part of my fear was really like whose Cheerios have I pissed in? And because basically it's people who, I mean, they could get me fired with impunity, and there was nothing I could do about it. And to know that like they could reach out and touch you on that level, and you would have just no recourse whatsoever, was very humbling. And you spend a couple of weeks with a rock in your stomach.
Yeah.
And not eating a ton, not sleeping a ton. And one of the things that I can offer to guys who, and like, you don't have to pay me for this. If you're having this experience and you reach out to me, we can talk. One of the things that I can offer to guys who are in that situation is just like, hey man, you're probably not eating, right? You're probably not sleeping. I've been there. It gets better. You're going to be all right. You're going to be glad it happened.
Yeah. Ultimately,
I mean, I don't know anybody who this has happened to who hasn't said, man, I'm sure glad they kicked my ass out. Having to because who sabotages themselves? Like people who post anonymously online and they say shit that everybody knows you're not allowed to say. They, on some level, what they're saying is, my life inside the box is not worth it to me. I don't want to live in that box.
Yeah.
And so I'm willing to take because what's a tweet? Like, what is the upside of a tweet? Like, what's the best case scenario for you saying some off the wall shit on Twitter? Like, there's not really, like, you go viral, I guess. Who cares? Like, especially if you're anonymous. Like I got quoted on Tucker once. And I was really excited, but I was anon. So like, it's not like I'm going to get invited for an interview. It doesn't, like, that's about as good as it gets. And so really what you're saying is, please throw my ass out. Please expel me from the system.
It's self-sabotage is what you mean.
Yeah. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying, listen to what you're like, watch what you're doing and interpret that. What does that mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I've experienced this on a much tinier level, just in, I just don't keep my mouth shut in the workplace. So it's just a matter of time. But, so like when I read this, And when I listen to some of your other stuff, when I read this thing, and again, I just have this overwhelming feeling of evil. Why? I've noticed something in our space, and especially with really, really intelligent people like you, where like, why can't we just say that our opposition is evil? Like, why can't we just say, like, why can't we just say that? And then why are we always trying to like explain them so much?
Well, I think there's value in both of those frames. I think you do need to understand malevolence, and you also need to understand what makes a person turn to malevolence. What makes a person how does it look inside their head? Because if you can figure out what it looks like inside their head, you can predict their behavior a lot better than if you just act like they're just Satan.
Yeah, right.
Because I mean, for one thing, human beings have limitations. They lose one of the most beautiful things about that I get to tell guys who get doxxed is like they're gonna forget that you exist. Like once they've shot their wad, you know, they really can't punish you any worse. And so I think it's useful, and it's funny because if you've got a big account on Twitter and you take one of those frames, you're going to have 20 people in your replies being like, you asshole, they're not just evil, they blah, blah, blah. And if you say, oh no, they're explainable, they're going to be like, hey, you asshole, they're just evil. Like,
right.
you know, you can't win.
Yeah.
But it's worth exploring both.
Definitely. No, I hear what you're saying strategically. I just think like you've said as much on Kashuda. You've said like we reach a point where what they're doing or the things that they're doing become it's just this kind of there's so many factors together that you stop being able to describe it as anything besides either God or the devil. And it's actually really funny, the tweet we just wrote because that tweet is about that, actually. You're saying that like the forces of evil that not evil, the forces of like violence in history that create change are in fact God, right? That's kind of what you're saying. And unless you face those things as a repentant person, you're acting against God.
Yeah, God often sends the destroyer.
Right.
And yeah, the thing to do in response to that is get right with God and then fight, but don't try to just fight. You gotta figure out why God sent the destroyer.
Right, exactly. And this is exactly what we're talking about. So I guess in Hasidic or Hasidic Judaism, there is no evil. It's just distance from God. It's like the further it's just the light gets darker and darker and darker, and the darkness looks a certain way, and that's why like the word for atonement is actually return, because it's like returning back, you know what I mean, into the light from the darkness. I don't know if I believe this personally. I don't necessarily know if I fully like believe that, but I guess my question is, how do you distinguish between, is there a difference between the Spaniards and the Romans in your example, who are perhaps God embodied or God's will? Is there anything that is actually separate from God that truly is evil?
Well, I mean, I think that it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to him by whom they come. That scripture. Like I think the Assyrians, when they were sticking rings through children's noses and ears and dragging them across the desert, I think they're going to be accountable for that. But I also think that that the conquered peoples had a part to play in making that happen, and God says as much. And I think it's exactly what I'm talking about with Antifa. Like, I participated in my destruction, my immolation.
Right.
We were collaborators on that. And I did, I spent that 2 weeks really searching, thinking, because I basically said, I have to have God on my side, or this is so much bigger than me. This is so out of my control. The people that want to hurt me, there's nothing I can do. And so I said, God, if they're right and I'm a vicious bastard and I need to go apologize to everybody, show me, help me see it. And like, everybody's got things they wish they hadn't said. And the conclusion that I came to was that God was not on the side of my accusers. God didn't believe they were telling the truth about me. But God was in what happened.
Right.
Because it led to so many good things. And I mean, the fact is, I was sitting on more money in cash than I had ever had before. And why? Like, why did it just happen to happen right then? And when I was in this position to take advantage of it, and now we've helped all these people, and I'm like, clearly, unambiguously, that to me is miraculous. But it's not, the thing that I felt the need to repent for was staying in that horrible job, staying in that disgusting, and swallowing it, just taking it in the teeth every day. I talked to the guys about this, and I don't want to put words in God's mouth for them, right? What I say to them is, like, I believe that some of you are like living below your privileges and being less than you ought to be. And if you take it up with God and he says, no, I actually want you in the cube, you'll never hear a word one from me about that again. But just examine that. Just take a look at it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's how I feel about it.
I think so many men are so miserable because they're spiritually in these jobs that, again, as you said, you just have to eat shit all day. And you don't really notice it, and I think a lot of guys think that is my job. My job is to eat shit, which it is actually now. Like, it's a total lie that your job, particularly, probably, I don't know how serious what you were doing was, but when I was working in the mainstream,
it wasn't.
My job was to eat shit. Like, my job was not to produce anything, actually. I would have been better off if I had spent no time doing creative work, just written the first sentence that came out of my mouth and just eaten shit really well. I would have been like the king of, I would have been the chief creative director. So because we live in a world that's the way it is, I don't think it's always been that way. I know you're not a fan of the longhouse metaphor, but I'm not sure that that's what it is. I have worked at definite longhouses before, just because marketing is like that. But I do feel like probably in the past there was a little bit more dignity towards the work product you were making, or maybe not. I mean, maybe that's never been the way it is, right? I mean, people say, oh, it was always about backstabbing and backbiting, and the guys in the business suits, it was all politics. So like, has it, is our time actually any different now? I don't know.
I don't necessarily know that it is. I think, I mean, first of all, I'm kind of a history's bunk kind of a guy. Like, I don't necessarily, I don't know how much can really be known affirmatively about history, but as far as the longhouse, I actually am a fan of the metaphor.
Oh, you are? I thought you were
just
not. You didn't like it.
no. I like it as the metaphor. I just think that what I maybe, if I have a thing about BAP's sort of worldview that I think is complicated, or that I would elaborate on, I think that there are hierarchies that are healthy and that are mutually respectful, that you can be in a subordinate position with respect to another person and not resent and despise them, and you can be in a superior position to someone and not have contempt and disgust for them. And I see the longhouse as when the forces of resentment take over everything, and it's the weak and the sick and the stupid mobbing up against the strong. I think that totally happens. I guess what I would say is, I think that it's kind of like the alpha, how they sort of debunked the alpha male concept with wolves. You
Right.
heard about this?
Yeah. It's like not like the strongest. It's the it's
the dad.
It's the okay. Right.
It's the dad.
Yeah.
Like in captivity, if you put a bunch of unrelated wolves in a pen, then you will see this alpha structure emerge with and it's this sort of brutal process whereby there is conquest and submission. But in the wild, they live in families. And I think humans are the same way. If you put us in a healthy environment, it's the tribe, it's the kin group, and the longhouse, and also this murderous pirate reaction to the longhouse.
Yeah,
I think those are both, man, and maybe what he's saying, and maybe what I can agree with, is that the murderous pirate is the nemesis. It's the response to the longhouse, and then everything burns down and you can start over fresh in a more healthy way. That's probably true, but I don't think that's the only view, if that makes sense. So there's something outside that view.
Wolves, as you're saying, it's actually the families, right? And you've talked about your hens. I actually had never thought about what a pecking order is before, and you say that on one of your podcasts. So you're saying that when hens are just by themselves, they do this hierarchy thing and they fight a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And then when a rooster comes, they just stop. They stop fighting because they just know the rooster is just dump the rooster. It's rooster and everybody else.
Right. And it establishes it establishes. I mean, it's unambiguous. So the most dangerous situation that you can be in is like all wars basically are because somebody miscalculated who was strongest. And so if it's close, there's likely to be a fight because both sides will think they can win.
Yeah.
If it's unambiguous, I mean, that's what Pax Americana, Pax Romana is. It's just there's a top dog and everybody knows there's a top dog and nobody's fighting. Yeah. And basically what we're seeing unfold now is being called into question.
Yeah, right. Well, but I find that interesting, both those metaphors with the hens and with the wolves, because, and also the fact that you're Mormon, in both of those examples, there's a gender thing that it's not all roosters, right? It's one rooster and a lot of hens.
Sure.
What?
Sure.
And same with
Sure, yeah.
wolves, right? Because with the wolves, for the dad to be in charge, there has to be like every single young male, whatever, can't then go and become the alpha, right? Some have to not be the alpha in order for the numbers
They
to
run off.
Yeah, they run off.
off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what do we do about those men, right? I mean, what do we do about the roost? Actually, like literally in terms of like biology, where did the other roosters go? Do they just all die? Like what happens to the people who don't become the rooster in the
Oh, well, I mean, it depends on, again, like we're talking about domesticated versus wild, and we're also not chickens. We're not exactly like chickens. I mean,
yeah, of course.
basically your ideal scenario with chickens is like 8 to 10 hens per rooster. If you have less hens than that, then the roosters are going to be too hard on the hens. They're going to try to mate with them all the time, and they're going to stress them out and make them exhausted.
Yeah.
And if you have more hens than that, then basically sort of the control will get weaker, and some of those hens will kind of take on the rooster role in their own little pack, and it'll be this really chaotic female only space. And basically I think though that humans actually are more sophisticated, and one of the ways that we live in more complex, I mean, because what wild animals do is they just they either get penned in and are much less healthy and die, or they spread until they can't spread anymore and they start to die. And human beings, the way that we're able to operate at a much greater level of abstraction, and to hold more human minds in our own mind, more relationships. And that's sort of the root. You heard of Dunbar's number?
Yeah. What is that again? What I have heard.
Well, so they measured all these primate brains, all the different species of primate, and they compared that with their default, like what's the average size of a troop of baboons, what's the average size of a troop of chimpanzees, what's the average size of whatever it is of gorillas, I don't know what you call them, but there's basically a straight line of like, if their brains are bigger, they have bigger tribes. And the human, if you plot humanity on that axis, it's something like 160, 170
that you can keep track of, that you're like members that your brain can like actually keep track of, right? Yeah,
right. And to organize at a greater level than like that could be like a tribe, a very sort of organic, without the need for a lot of abstraction. And what you see basically, like the sort of the BAP model of how civilization began, and also like the libertarian and communist model of how civilization began, is always the stationary bandit. It's somebody imposed their will by force and started demanding resources of the oppressed, and BAP says that's good, and communists and libertarians say it's bad.
Yeah.
But I think the proto civilization is Abraham. I think it's a very prolific, very productive, very charismatic family. And you know, if you want a likeness of that, the movie Dune, where you've got these retainers who clearly have this loyalty to this family.
Yeah.
And it's like they're not part of the family because they're in a subordinate position, but the family, they are possessed by the family. They are owned by the family, and they also own the family in a sense.
Right, like Bannermen in Game of Thrones, right? Like
exactly. And people frame that like it's just rich people making excuses for why they get to boss people around. But I would love to be a Bannerman. Would you like to be a Bannerman? Would that be cool?
Definitely.
To like
definitely be
have I mean, yeah, like there's nothing dishonorable or like you're not a cuck by being in a subordinate position
Well, and
in a great house.
Yeah, Nietzsche would certainly agree. I mean, Nietzsche has said, he's says the best leaders are the best followers. You have to be fully, um, completely obsessed with either role, no matter what you find yourself in. He's certainly not saying you can only be outside.
Yeah.
Which is really the communist instinct, right? But then again, the pirate instinct is also, in a way, anti-hierarchical. So it's like it's all these dueling kind of things, and it's impossible to tell which one is which.
Well, and the feudal system, like if you ever look up like feudal oaths, what people swore to, there's very clearly like it's an abstracted father-son relationship.
Oh, interesting.
It's you are and there's love, like love is expressed in these feudal oaths. Like you are promising to love your lord, and he's promising to love you. And there's basically what we've done is we've created this like social technology that allows us to abstract out the instinct of fatherhood to create these systems. And then the feudal system got so big and so fractalized that it started to collapse. And then we had to go to a further level of abstraction, which was the nation, the patria, which patria comes from the root for the fatherland, right?
Yeah, right.
And then your filial duty becomes your duty to the nation. And that's about as far as you could abstract it out, because then we had the civic nation, which is like, the civic nation is everybody who like assents to this set of ideals, but like what other connection do we have? Like, what if we start to disagree? Like, and that's basically where we're at. Like our sense of identity, our ability to abstract these instincts has reached its limit, and we can't connect anymore.
So in Scientology, there's this, they do a lot of like mapping in Scientology of like who you are and where you are and stuff. And one of the things they map in Scientology is there's 4 quadrants, and it's globe, nation, family, self. And it's something like that. I'm probably getting that slightly wrong, but every person has like a different blend of loyalty in each quadrant. Like some people are completely obsessed with humanity, like they're totally like preoccupied with humanity. Some people are completely selfish. Some people are family, absolute family over everything. Some people are my nation. I'm ready to die for my nation. And one of the things they test you on is like, which one are you? Are you which way are you oriented? Which I always thought was kind of cool. And it seems like you're talking a lot about that. It's these levels of abstraction, but all these levels of abstraction are rooted in the original familial instinct.
Yeah, I think so. And it's because that's if you're trying to think about like what is the evolutionary pathway of loyalty, like what makes people loyal. If you think about us as animals, well, the evolutionary pathway of loyalty is I want you to succeed because your success, because we're cousins, and our genetic, I want my genetic line to survive in whatever degree it can. Obviously, it'd be better if my genetic line survived, but if by mobbing up with my cousins, it's that Arab proverb, me against my brother and I against our cousins, and me and my cousins against the next tribe. And those are the concentric circles, right?
Right.
And it's just closeness to your it's Dawkins, the selfish gene. It's your stuff wanting to survive.
Right. Okay, so there's another topic that's related to this I want to talk to, but before we move on to that, I forgot to ask and to give you a chance to answer this, which is, there's this blacklist paper out there that has all of the sins you've ever committed on it as a thinker, as anti-Semitism and racism and sexism and every ism that is on there. So in terms of the isms, like how racist are you? Like how, like I just want to ask, like, where do you stand on all this stuff?
I disavow racism. I disavow racism in all its forms. I think part of where we are at as a culture is we are so committed to absolute egalitarianism on every axis. Like that's such a load-bearing structure in our culture that we're not willing to ask even the most basic, obvious questions. And do I think that we are different? Yeah, I do. I do think we're different. Do I think that race can be detected in a clustering algorithm in pretty much the exact same way that you and I would cluster people by race? Yeah, they've done that. That works. Do I hate people who are different colors? No. Like that's the game that they want to play.
Yeah.
Is they've got this word racist that maps to basically characters in movies they've made.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I just hate you because you're different and go back where you came from. And that's, they've mapped that word onto a false concept. And then they've remapped it onto notices who does the sprinting in the Olympics. Like those are not the same thing. Those aren't the same thing. And so, I think that game is going to destroy America if we let them continue to play it. I think,
yeah.
And I mean, they do the same thing with sex. It's if you notice that fellas open a lot of pickle jars, that's the same thing as this Mad Men grab ass thing.
Well, but here's where I run into trouble because I obviously completely agree with everything you've said about the races, right? And it's I believe in what the founding fathers said about it. Every man is created equal, right? Obviously every man is not created the same, and that's not what they meant. Anybody who thinks that that's what they meant is a complete idiot. They weren't saying every man is the exact same and deserves the same outcome. That's so clearly not what they meant. They're trying to say in the eyes of God, every man is equal, right? It's not like there's any person who's born on earth who is in some inherent metaphysical way superior to anybody else, right? And this is kind of the rooster and the chickens thing. In comparison to God, none of us is a little farther ahead because we're born in some way. That's obviously true.
Yeah.
At least as far as I'm concerned. Of course, white people are better at some stuff. Black people are better at some stuff, obviously, right? And maybe right now in today's world, people are better at more stuff. That's even possible. Wow. And in another world, Black people would be better at more stuff. It's always whatever. It's constantly changing. When it comes to women, though, you've said stuff before that I completely agree with, by the way. And this is very, rooted in all kinds of religions, which is, you said something great, which is man proposes, woman disposes, which I love. I think that's great. I'm sure I don't know where that's from, but
originally it's man proposes, God disposes, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Whoops.
Because women are the I think Jordan Peterson is right that women represent nature.
Well,
women represent the judgment of nature.
Yeah, sure. I think it's the man is the spark, right? We're the sperm cell, and woman is the nurturing force. And certainly I would never ever say that makes men superior to women. I don't believe that at all. But we are different than women. And so it's I on Kashuda, you got a little bit gun shy when she said, "So you're just for men. Exit your group is just for men." Right?
Yeah, exit's just for men. Yeah.
So why is it so hard to just say that? Why can't we just be
well, I was feeling her out for starters.
What?
I was feeling her out for starters.
Yeah,
I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know her that well.
Yeah.
you know, how careful do you have to be in that conversation? But I would say what I don't want people to get the mistaken impression, the lie that I don't want to tell by omission, is that this isn't a problem for women, or we don't want to help women, or I mean, what I want to tell them is, I don't necessarily like if you're in a shit job and your kids are like in daycare and they're like coming home with suspicious bruises and like sick all the time. I can't tell you how many women I know who are like that. It's like, look at what you are trading. Like, look at the opportunity cost of your email job. And I mean, like that's such a sexist sentiment that I'm basically quoting Elizabeth Warren, who was the Democratic, she was a Democratic candidate for president.
Right. So you think Warren said that exactly what you just said at some point?
I mean, no, not exactly, but that's
In
from the
some
two
way.
income trap.
Right. Yeah.
The two income. You ever heard of the two income trap?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I'm in it. I'm in it.
Yeah.
I'm in the
Well,
trap.
that's her book, and she wrote a big
Right.
study about like how after you account for the extra car,
Yeah.
the house that's in a safer neighborhood and a better school district because you're not raising your kids, the school system's raising your kids,
Yeah.
and after you account for childcare alone,
Yeah.
it ends up being the case that like the woman's added contribution to the household income is like $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I, you know, so why
really
is that just for
right.
guys? Well, it's because
yeah.
because I don't want two incomes. I don't think that that's the answer. I don't think that's the solution, especially because of another thing I believe in, which is that we ought to be having lots of kids.
Yeah.
And it makes zero economic sense after kid 2.5, basically to have both parents working.
Yeah, I just had Peachy Keenan on here, and she has 5 kids also. And she's
oh, nice.
Yeah, you should talk to her. She's very much the same conversation. But I guess what I want to say though is like isn't so much of the issue like the difference in this. You've said a lot before, and I agree with you when you say this. It's something is coming. Something is going to happen. There's no way we can continue down this path. Too many people are too unhappy. And there's a couple differences, though, now that I don't think we've ever dealt with before. One of those differences is abundance. People aren't hungry. And if people aren't hungry, they're going to be so much less inclined to, vote a certain way, whatever you want. Let's not Fed post, but do
Sure.
anything crazy, right?
Sure.
Another thing though is women are in power now. Like I don't think that's ever been the case before. There has never been this many women in hardcore positions of power before. And so this like time around is going to be very different than it was before, because men, we have this inclination, and we'll get to rationality in a second, but men deeply have this inclination to protect women, to be nice to them, to not argue with them, and to care for them, and to be a good guy. We all want to be a good guy. It's the most human thing possible. We want to be a good guy towards women. But we have this insanely difficult problem where, in a way, women are our enemy. I hate to say it that way. Obviously, woman isn't our enemy, but this power structure is like extremely gynocratic. So it's like, do you agree with that?
Here's what I would say. People, a lot of this is just egalitarianism. And what I mean by egalitarianism writ large means everybody's equally suited for positions of power. And what I see happening is not that women seem to be really empowered and really getting the things that they want. Actually, so my mom, I can tell this story. My mom is she always worked, and she's a, you know, professional, and she's had mixed feelings about like me running this boys only fraternity. And I got to have this extended conversation with her. She's in town a little while ago, and I told her, like, look around and look at what this is doing. Look at how people are feeling. Like, do they seem happy? Do they seem like they're getting what they want? Are they doing this because it's their like will to power? It's the deepest part of them that's what they want, or are they feeling like the sense of obligation? Like if I don't get the email job, the bad guys win.
Yeah.
And I'm not like, I can't tell you how many women I've talked to who've said that, like, I'm letting down the team if I don't go, you know. And it's like, fuck the team. Like, it, you know, it's and that ultimately, whenever you insist upon egalitarianism, what will happen is the reality will be inequality. And when that reality surfaces, you can either reject egalitarianism, or you can embrace a model of oppressor and oppressed. Because if they don't deserve, if there's not a merited hierarchy, then it's an unmerited hierarchy. And what is that? Suppression. That's what that is. And so, and to be clear, like, I don't think clean houses get roaches. Like, I think the all of these movements since the 60s, and, you know, they didn't start in the 60s. It's they started because of real grievances that people had, and real problems. And that doesn't mean that it's in any sense a move in the right direction. But like, I guess what I would say is, like, with me and my wife, I lead, but I'm very consultative. I try to be. I try to include her in all these decisions, because it's I think you mentioned Game of Thrones earlier. One of the best lines from those books is it's the wildling woman, and she says, a man can own a woman, or he can own a knife, but not both. And the point she's making,
it's a great line.
well, the point that she's making is that you can't go to bed next to a subdued enemy. Like, nobody wants that. No, like, and that goes for all of these hierarchies. It's so much better and so much easier and so much more gets done if you have actual genuine consensus. And you won't always have it. And so like, sometimes there has to be just a decider, and there's nothing wrong with that. But like, you have to operate by consensus, and you have to, and the leadership job, if you're doing it right, is not obviously easier than the follower job. Like, it's, everybody has to act well their part. Well, I mean, and I think basically the reason that we're enemies now is that just that there's been this constant cycle of mutual defection, people breaking the rules and screwing each other.
You mean the reason why men and women are enemies?
Yeah. I think
aren't we saying, like,
everybody's been damaged.
Everybody's been damaged, but we're still saying that, and you're getting it from the Bible, and so am I to a different degree. We're both saying, what does the Bible say? The Bible says, hierarchically speaking, it's the man is the father, is in the position of primary power, and then the woman is following
subordinate.
Yeah, subordinate, right? which is like, of course, because of the way the world is now, we all think, well, who would want that? You know, like who wants to be subordinate? Whereas you and I believe, and it's like I can't lie, I believe that's the way it should be. I don't know if I believe that's the way it should be from the Bible, or if I just have a connection with God that I always have had, and it's just comes through that way, or if I look at the world and it's extremely obvious to me when I look around.
Yeah.
But
All
like
three, I would say.
the way it is right now, like with women, how are they ever? I mean, what would your mom say to that? Like, well, what would my mom? Oh my God. If I ever said that to my mom, forget it. You know, I mean, she would start crying and you know, freak out. So it's like,
I think my mom sees the way I treat my wife. I think
but
is
what
it
would you
comes
say
down
if you
to.
said your job is to be subservient to your husband?
Well, I mean that like that you're right that it's a deeper conversation.
Yeah.
It's deeper than men versus women. It's more about, I mean, you're I think you have to pan back and basically say like everybody has a stewardship.
Yeah.
And everybody is accountable for their stewardship to somebody. And I mean, one in our church, that there's lots of fractal chains of stewardship and accountability. And
I think the way we deal with it,
I think you just have to get comfortable with that.
I think the way we do it is to simply like, look, again, it's not even really about the man, you know, making the woman subservient to him. It's really about, let's do it the Elizabeth Warren way. Let's do it the leftist way, which is to say, look, every woman knows as soon as they have babies, the baby is a part of the woman for the first, like, you know, 6 months to a year of time. Every woman in the world, no matter how woke, maybe not every single one, maybe there's some exceptions, but unless you're truly alienated from reality, most women understand innately when you have the baby. You know, my wife comes from the absolute wokest possible upbringing, as do I. And she immediately was like, no, I'm not leaving the baby. Like, I absolutely do not want to leave at all. So it's like, I think we just say, look, you're getting duped. Like, by not
I've seen,
mother, you're not, it's all you're doing is switching your subservience to the family to your boss. That's all you're doing. And that's stupid.
Yeah. And I think you've touched on, I mean, you could look at the way that married women vote, married women with children vote.
Right.
It's transformative.
Yeah.
And the
hey, speaking of, hi.
Okay, close the door. I'll be out in a bit.
We didn't see her.
You can cut that or not. I don't care.
We didn't see her, so.
Okay. What I really believe about all that, in Genesis, it says, "Thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee." And I think those are linked. I think desire is the key. And because if you look at 50 Shades of Grey, if you look at Twilight, if you look at women are not averse to being in a subordinate position. They really are not. It is deep in the blood. They would like to be in a subordinate position to the right guy. And they're reading all these period novels about bygone times when you could be just really subordinate to a guy, all the way. And so to act like they prefer it this way, this egalitarian way, when they're like settling down in the bathtub to be in a different place, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And so I think part of why the accusation of being a cuck is so bound up with this like sort of having a feminist wife situation is because I think that men who can lay it down the right way exert an anti-feminism energy all around their person that just deactivates feminism.
Yeah.
And women like to have their feminism deactivated, in my experience.
Yeah.
And so I fundamentally, and this is probably one of my more BAP like takes. I think the solution is Dionysian. I think you need to reawaken women's erotic imagination, and you need them to trust you with that, which is like, those are two very separate, very challenging problems.
Right. Well, the safety and the sexual thing. It's like kind of their.
And there's not an obvious policy solution for that. Like, yeah. I don't know how you craft that into law.
Well, somebody once said that about fame. They were like, fame is the absolute most crazy aphrodisiac to women because it both comes with like total safety and total like idolization or whatever you would say.
Yeah, subordination.
Like, total subordination, right? So it's like that's why fame is just women cannot resist because it comes with like both of those things.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to keep going here just because I definitely want to get to this, a few other questions about rationality and irrationality. And the way I want to go in there is, you have a podcast that you released last year called The Frontier Was Always Closed to You, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's really good. It is really, really good podcast. You break down Albion Seed, I believe, which is a book that is about the 4 folkways of colonial America, and how each one of these different ways is a way to escape from like this rotting tyrannical overlord, which they were dealing with, of course, in England. And so the 4 sort of like teams, speaking of Game of Thrones, the 4 like tribes are the Puritans, who were imagining like up in New England. There's the Cavaliers, who are down in Virginia. There's the Quakers, who are Pennsylvania, and then there's the Border Reivers, who were imagining like West Virginia, or like wherever the Scots Irish ended up settling. And like each one of these groups kind of has their own characteristics of why they were successful. And so I guess like I just want to know like what were the different tactics that each one of these groups used, and then we'll talk about
it. Okay, so off the dome, I gotta think about this for a second. The Puritans were essentially trying to wall off, like create a walled garden, basically, that was governed according to their rules. And they had, variously friendly and unfriendly relationships with the government in England, which was more or less under the control of sort of friendly factions in England. But their vision of freedom was, we get to make the rules. We own the beach. We decide what you're going to wear to the beach. And that really resonates with me, because I think the problem with sort of pure libertarianism is that you're not, well, I guess pure libertarianism, someone's going to get mad at me for deciding what pure libertarianism, but like a total like values free libertarianism where everyone should just be allowed to do what they individually feel like doing. That's not freedom to me. That's not, because I won't be free to raise my family the way I want to, because the thing that I want is this collective thing, and not collectivist, but it's like me and not just my family. It's like I have things that I want to accomplish in the world that require some cooperation, and that cooperation is really, really hard to secure unless there's some rules. And I think the Puritans had that figured out, even though they were otherwise really obnoxious. And not necessarily obnoxious in like the Hollywood way that they're treated, but more in like the sort of in your business, nosy, like BLM mom on Facebook kind of way. But anyway, Quakers, same. Quakers basically just had like a nagocracy, just rule by nagging. And what there is to like about them is that when they were in England, they were very principled and very, like, they would not tip their hat to a lord. Like if their landlord passed them on the street, they'd like shake his hand, and like they were very like committed to this, like, you're not better than me thing. And they got their shit kicked in for it. And you know, you got to respect that. You know, that's conviction. And I basically that's kind of how they did things. Like they just sort of they were like out there doing their thing, and if you didn't like it, you know, they could just take a lot of punishment. And it actually worked out more or less for them for a while, which is surprising. Like you would think that they would just get knocked over, but they didn't.
They're like the ultra liberals. They're like the leftists, basically. They're the communists. They're the most.
Well, I mean, basically, I would say that liberalism today, if it has cultural roots, it's sort of an alliance between the Puritans in terms of like their model of how do we make decisions. Because the Quakers, it was like total consensus. It was like everyone must agree about everything or we're not doing anything. and which actually works out if you're in a minority, because you don't necessarily, but Puritans was like, if 51% of us say that we're going to jump off a cliff, then we're jumping off that cliff.
Yeah. And
very like local direct democracy. So like your alderman would be in charge of like what kind of cornflakes you're allowed to eat. And so that like invasiveness and that like everything should be decided by the democratic process, that's kind of from the Puritans. But in terms of the values of like free to be you and me, that's more Quaker.
That's kind of,
but yeah. And there's like a paradox there, but here we are. The Cavaliers were basically trying to recapitulate the aristocratic system here in America. And what I like about them is they had a grip on hierarchy, and George Washington was essentially king and all of these planters were essentially king in their little domain, and their form of government, like the House of Burgesses, was almost like this confederation of little kings. And they stayed out of each other's business by and large, and that to me is very appealing. Obviously, none of these are idealized societies. Like you read this book, and you don't necessarily want to live in any of these places, but there's bits and pieces you can take. And then the Border Reavers are kind of like orcs. They're kind of like monsters, and that's where all my family's
my favorite.
from. Right?
I feel like they're like the cowboys.
Oh, they're fun.
Cowboys. They're cowboys.
Yeah, and they're like they got in trouble in Congress because they would whittle on the chairs. They would like cut up the chair with pocket knives, and like start fights and show up drunk, and like they're just a mess. And very entertaining stories. And they really epitomized the like, you can't tell me what to do, get off my lawn.
Yeah.
American, like the reason that we still have 1A and 2A in this country is the Border Reavers, because they're like we will just strap on a vest before we give up these guns.
It's like the Comanche. Do you ever see Hell or High Water, where they're talking about the Comanche?
Oh, it's favorite.
I love that movie. And he says the Comanche means enemy of who? Everybody. It's like that's the Border Reavers were like the Comanches. They were just totally like do not mess with us. Total war, complete war people.
Yeah. And so having them to go fight the Indians was kind of a match made in heaven. They love to fight those Indians. Right. And have sex with those Indians and get drunk with those Indians. Like they just sort of wild people. Yeah. And lots to but not necessarily people you'd want to be neighbors with, that would be tough.
So when was this exactly? Because when was all of this happening?
That's prior to the revolution. That's in fact long prior. So like if I remember right, obviously like the Puritans and the Cavaliers are coming, like Jamestown was basically Cavaliers, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony was the Puritans, and the Pennsylvania colony was the Quakers.
Yeah.
And I think the back country was sort of like those were sort of discrete waves of migration. And then the borderers were sort of coming over as indentured servants into Virginia, but then there was too many of them and they weren't like really doing what they were like. They were just really hard to tell what to do. And so they kept just getting like expelled, pushed west. Like, you go deal with the Indians. And so it sort of extended over this long, because they were just sort of the plebeians, the sort of surplus labor. But it was all 17th century, mid 18th century.
Yeah. Okay. So right, we're talking like 100 years or so before the revolution, or maybe a little more. Yeah, I love the border reavers. It's great because it's like we see a little bit of ourselves in each one of them. But I'm just like, my favorite are the crazy border guys. And I think one thing that you said about them when in your great podcast was like they were totally irrational. And it's so funny because now we're always talking about the leftward march of Chahulu, which I still cannot say. And the smart guys in our sphere, Yarvin and this guy I had on the Distributus, they all say that the lineage of that leftward marching thing dates to the Puritans. That's this Massachusetts group. And you put it perfectly. It's 51%. It's rationalism. It's like utilitarianism, which is like, it's fine on its own, but taken to its extreme, we see how terrible it is now, right? I don't know if I necessarily, again, I'm kind of with you on, does Chahulu really always march left? I don't, maybe in America, but I don't think in general, like whatever. The opposition to that, I kind of think we see them a little bit on a spectrum, is these border reavers who act completely irrationally. Like if you kill one of them, they're going to spend the rest of their lives just trying to kill you, even if it's totally irrational, even if it's like bad for them, right? So like that kind of total war strategy, that kind of like gang mentality is completely irrational. But it's also like, in a way, it is rational because it makes people not mess with you. It's like, and then they're not going to mess with you later.
It's game theoretic rationality.
Right.
And that's I mean, that's how it started, right? I mean, because the feudal, or not the feudal system, but the feuding system, the system of blood feud in border culture is a holdover from the borderlands of Scotland and England and a little bit of Ireland, because you were in this situation where nothing was defensible and your stuff was just constantly getting burned down and stolen. And so people didn't really build anything. They just sort of lived in the dirt almost, and stuff that they wouldn't mind too much if it got burned down. And without any kind of organized, predictable, trustworthy law, the only way to be left alone was to be perceived as dangerous beyond all reason. Because let's say somebody's like 70-30 outnumbering you, right? And they figure they can get your stuff, they can get your women, like they're going to win if they pick a fight, right? Like you might be in a situation like that. But if you can be like, no, I'm going to like hide in the bog and I'm going to like rip your guts out while you're sleeping, and I'm going to like go find everybody that looks like you, and I'm going to like if you can build this reputation for just like blind, unreasoning, never-ending vengeance, then maybe that 70-30 doesn't look so good, and maybe they back off, and like they got to be really sure. They got to be really sure that they got all of you, Yeah,
you better get all of us. Right. But
you see that in Arab culture too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically any environment where basically all marginal peoples who live on marginal land where defense isn't really possible, and you have to sort of mob up, and you have to sort of take the law into your own hands. You see similar structures of blood feud and game theoretic violence.
Game theory. So without trying to put too much of a rationalist spin on this irrational behavior, you've talked a lot about the irrationality of following God. So, you've kind of said that like there are times in your life where there was one really great passage in the, I think the beginning of your first episode with Kashuta, where you guys kind of talk about this thing of like the rationalists. So we're talking about these rationalists of today, like the effective altruism type people who are sitting around thinking of all the ways to like run society best. They're like, oh, we need God. God is a great organizing, it's a great organizing force. So people should just believe in God for a rational reason.
Sure.
But your position is that like you can't do that, right? Like you
No,
can't
I mean,
actually
like, I mean, empirically, you can't do it. I mean, you watch people try; they don't succeed. They because God asks you to give more than it makes sense to give.
right, right.
It's always it like you have to be paid back in miracles. Like you can't like and you can't be, if your orientation is around like civic cohesion or whatever, like you're always going to be better off cheating. Like it's great. Like Jack Kerouac had this experience. He goes into all these, it's the dawn of the automobile, right? And all of these little towns are wide open that have never had strangers in them, and everybody's known everybody since forever. And they've never had to lock their doors. And this guy shows up, and he just goes from city to city, just screwing everybody's daughters and taking money for jobs he doesn't do, and like he's just a huge piece of shit. And of course, counterculture loved this guy. And basically, like, whether you want to be a good guy or a piece of shit, like there is a strong incentive to go live in a society where everybody else is a believer. Because if you want to be good and do good things, well, it's just easier for everybody to trust each other. You get things done. It's very frictionless, it's very simple. And if you want to defect and screw everybody, you do that too for a while, and then you can move on. But there's no, the only mechanism against defection in that cohesion environment is God sees you.
Yeah.
And you actually want to please God, and you actually actually want to do what's right because you believe that that's the purpose of your existence, and that's what you're here on earth to do.
Yeah. Which is completely irrational. That's exactly like the point I'm trying to get at here, is that actually like
pre-rational.
Yeah. What I want to get at is that people would see the Puritans as the civilized ones and the border people as the uncivilized ones.
Yeah.
But actually, and this goes back to Nietzsche, and this is like fundamentally what Nietzsche believes, is the most weak part of humanity, the most animalistic part, the least like godly part of humans, is the part that we usually mistake for the godly part. Like what we think, and you talked about like the turn the other cheek thing, which everybody, all the people who aren't Christians who say these things from the Bible, like turn the other cheek, and love thy enemy, and the Caesar coin thing, or give to Caesar
Right.
what says. All these things, we think these pity elements are what makes us better than animals, but actually, the pity part is the most animalistic part of human beings because it's the most rational. It's like we get the most out of it most clearly. Whereas
Yeah.
the people who are actually the most godly, I would say, act the least rationally. Because as you just said so well, the belief in God is actually pre-rational. It's actually like the least utilitarian thing about us. Because it's not this calculation. It's pre-calculation. It is a relationship with something is there that you can't ever touch. I mean, you can touch in a way, but you can't articulate it.
Yeah. It's bigger than you. It's too big. It's too big to be apprehended. And I think that, yeah, on the subject of like probably my biggest frustration with sort of the online religious thing, whatever we're doing on Twitter, is these guys who they'll call me a fake Christian because I don't accept the Nicene Creed and the Athanasian Creed and everything. But then when you hear about like what they mean by being Christian, they mean that they argued themselves into this autism about like it's God is a ray, God is a line segment, God is a tetrahedron. Like it's this very like abstract, like thinky thing that they're doing. Like they've built, what they've done is they've built a very elegant model in their brain, and they're like, this model's so friggin' good, and they like worship, they worship the model. They're like, how could it not be God? It's so elegant, it's so perfect. And it's like, you've clearly made that up. Like,
wait, can you just
explain?
Can you explain a little more what you're talking about? Because I'm actually not like familiar with.
Okay, so it's the idea of Plato and the forms, and like God is the ultimate, the thing that everything trees up to,
okay.
and like
yeah,
and like there must be a God, because if there wasn't a God, then there'd be something greater, and then that would be God. And it's like this like infinitely recursive like they're like trying to trick themselves into believing. And it's like nobody talks that way. Like you wouldn't talk that way about anything you actually believed in. Like, does your mother love you? You wouldn't be like, well, surely she must because of the, like, it's just, let me draw on the chalkboard why that, yeah. Like,
right.
Like if you know it, then you know it. And God is someone you can know. And I think that it doesn't mean that you can encapsulate, that you can articulate, but you can know God. You can have that experience. You can see visions and dream dreams, and nobody who has had that experience talks that way, where they're like empirically, logically, rationally there must be.
Yeah, because they're trying. Well, unless I guess the only other argument is like maybe that type of person, that's how they experience it. I mean, maybe just the way their brains work, they have such a narrow little thing. It's like they have to like go, build this crazy thing to ever actually peek in and like,
well, and that's what I think that kind of thing is good for, if it's good for anything.
Yeah.
If it gets you to take the problem seriously enough that you can get on your knees and make contact, then that's fine. Like there are people like I had to do a fair amount of that. I had to like big brain my way into just taking the question seriously. Lots of smart people have to do that. They just can't stop there.
So because you came up as a Mormon and a missionary and everything like that. That's what you mean?
I didn't grow up in a religious home.
Oh,
but,
you didn't? Okay.
No, but my grandparents, my mom's parents, are LDS, and so I would go to church like once every 6 months or so. And basically I started to go to actually early morning seminary during high school before I went to church. I didn't really go to church, but it was every morning I would go learn about scriptures. And then after high school, decided to go on a mission. And I actually had to start like going to church so that I could qualify to go on a mission. I hadn't really figured out that you need to go to church to go on a mission. And so I did that for 2 years. And basically I had my getting saved experience, which is not something that everybody in the church, they can't point to a day necessarily. It can be something that happens over time, and that's okay. But I mean, I had a particular day on the calendar that I could point to that, like, that was when it happened.
Can we know what happened, or is it private?
I mean, in broad strokes, I'll just say I had a confrontation with my sins, and I realized that I was inadequate to overcome them, and there was no fixing it myself, and I asked God to show up, and God showed up.
Wow.
And I mean, yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
For me, I always like made little like deals with God, even from very young age. And my parents were both totally a-religious. But I made this one deal one time. I used to have terrible anxiety, like really bad. I couldn't be around anywhere. I would always have to like leave and go. And I did these like weird little like OCD things, like where I would like look at the clock for a certain amount of time. And like I would stop in a certain place and everything. And I just was so anxious all the time. And I remember nobody had ever taught me to pray. I just like prayed automatically. I don't even know. I just like prayed over and over again to like feel all the anxiety at once so I could just get it over with and then not have to feel it like slow drip. You know what I mean? Just like feel it all in one thing. And then I wouldn't have it anymore. And one night I woke up in the middle of the night with like soul destroying, insane anxiety for like 5 minutes. And I got up, I was really young. I mean, I'm talking about I was like 10 or something. And I got up and puked. And after that, I was good for like the next like 8 years. Like I never felt anxiety anymore. And after that, I was like, oh shit, like, you know, this stuff really works. Like it's really real, you know, it really is like you know, if you can tune into it. I've been lucky, and I'm very lucky. Like I feel like I've always had a very expansive relationship with God, but it's like everything in our world tries to tell you not to, especially in my world. You know, I don't know where you actually grew up, like if it was in Utah and that was more acceptable, but
no, Texas. But
oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, no, it's absolutely the case that I mean, everybody's got the same internet these days. It's not there's not a lot of safe places. And even when I was a kid, you know, it was touch and go. But I think probably the biggest lie that gets told about that, and the biggest obstacle that people have, is they're expecting they are often expecting God to be a supernatural experience. And and basically, if you believe, as we believe, that the light of Christ is permeating your consciousness from the moment that you're born, then it's the water you're swimming in. It's always there, and you just have to learn how to discern it, how to distinguish it from your own thoughts and inclinations. And for me, once I figured out how to make that distinction, I started to realize that voice, that set of inclinations, knew things that I didn't know, and wanted things I didn't want, and aimed in directions that were mysterious to me. And then it became much simpler.
Yeah, once you can just serve that thing, it's hard though, man. It's very hard to
Yeah,
run.
simpler, not easier.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You're right. Simpler, not easier, definitely. Um, it's weird though when you hit the right path. I mean, yeah, I don't know. We don't have to get too deep into this, but all right, before we go, you've said before, let's end with this because this show is ostensibly about propaganda, although it never ends up actually being about it. You say
That was
we
pretty good propaganda. We had a good
right.
little
uh,
propaganda hour.
yeah, sure, sure. So you say we live in the most sophisticated propaganda environment in human history, and you actually just said this because you said everybody has the same internet. So what do you mean by that, and what can we do about it?
Well, I think basically the propaganda organs are picking up so much data, and they're able to perform so much minute analytics on what sells, and they're able to fail really fast and just try out new things on you all the time. Basically just computational complexity, computational power has increased relative to our brain's ability to resist it. And just by long experience, they've learned what works on people. And also by evolution, like the memes that trigger an immune response die off, and then they find other memes that don't trigger that immune response, and it just becomes more and more sophisticated. And I think what we're up against now is that basically the propaganda environment is it's not just that it's sophisticated, but it has succeeded in turning us against reproduction. And which, like, that's the only way this process can be arrested, is through collapse. This propaganda environment is leading all Western civilization, and eventually the rest of the world, to extinction, because no one's going to. I had a conversation with Malcolm Collins the other day. He runs pronatalist.org, and he was talking about how, assuming that the trajectory of Japan and Korea continues, that the current there will be 4.3 great grandchildren for every 1,000 living Koreans today.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's outrageous. It's insane. And
That's crazy.
which basically means that the Korean phenotype and the Korean civilization, the Korean culture, is going extinct. It's going to die.
Very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't replace that with Filipinos. They're not the same.
Yeah. Right.
And even if you wanted to replace it with Filipinos' birth rates look just the same. They're doing this. They're going shoo.
Yeah.
And they're behind. They're starting from a higher baseline, but everybody's birth rates are doing this. And Antifa will post that. They'll say that I'm doing a Roman there. But this basically what we're experiencing, the filter, and whatever survives in this propaganda environment, whatever way of life can iterate so that my kids choose to have grandchildren and their kids choose to have children, and so on. That's what makes it through. And part of what I'm doing at Exit, I'm building a community of guys who are concerned about that issue and who are trying to make themselves more sovereign so that they can resist that propaganda environment, so that they're not worried. Like, because there's a couple ways they can take away your job. They can what they really threaten you with is your kids. They threaten you with either, we're gonna take your kid away from you and cut his dick off or whatever. but maybe even more insidious when they say we're on the right side of history.
Yeah.
Excuse me. What they mean is we're going to poison your kids against you. We're going to make your kids loathe you and despise you and everything you stood for.
Yeah, they mean
that's their promise.
They mean we own history. That's what they mean, and that's a great point. That just clicked for me right now. Is they're so concerned about that because they think that they own history, and that means that they own your kids in a way, because they own the future, right?
Right.
But I guess what I would say back is, you just made a great point, which is the strains, the existing rare strains that are reproducing a lot right now in this totally downturn environment. Mormons, Hasids, like isn't that like the Taliban? You know what I mean? Like it's all these religious fundamentalists. So doesn't that therefore basically mean we're definitely going to win? Because it's like, if we're the only ones that are taking seriously the project of actually reproducing. So like, isn't that kind of like actually the biggest white pill of all?
What I would say is someone's going to win. And like, it's either humanity or this. And it's actually dicey with the Amish and the church, our church. It's dicey. It's not clear. I believe that there's going to be a colossal, apostasy is the right word. A colossal apostasy in my lifetime. And
what is that? That means what is that exactly? I mean,
people abandoning the faith. People abandoning the faith.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's going to happen simultaneously is people will finally be desperately poor. That's going to happen in our lifetime, because when the economy shrinks and it's not going to grow again, so many of our systems depend on reliable, permanent growth.
Yeah, that's true.
All of our advanced planning, all of our investment instruments depends on reliable growth. And if growth can't keep up, then there's going to be collapse and there's going to be extreme, like the Japanese are trying to fight it with automation right now. It's not really working. They just get more and more moribund. Maybe the good news is that if we're lucky, it'll happen over time and we'll see it coming and we can sort of adjust our personal situations to accommodate it. But I mean, poverty and squalor and hunger, that's going to change people's relationship that's going to change the relationship between men and women for sure. Immediately.
Oh my God. In two absolutely.
Yeah, just there will be a confrontation with reality, and we have a choice about how late and how sudden that confrontation is.
But don't we want this confrontation? I mean, it seems not to be an accelerationist, but it seems like
because you want to catch the ball now and let it swing and not get hit in the face with it.
Well, a lot of people are going to need to get hit in the face with it if that's the direction that this is going.
Yeah, and that's like, so we're putting together this conference on natalism later this year that we're basically looking for some answers.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have the answers, but and basically just, I mean, so partially it's to search for answers, but partially it's to just get the people who are problem aware in a room.
Yeah.
So that they know each other and can maybe make some plans of their own.
Well, a lot of that is happening. There's a lot of IRL stuff that's kind of popping up. I just did the DeVere ball. Speaking of,
what's that?
The DeVere ball was this thing that just happened in New York. That's like Curtis Yarvin and James O'Keefe was there, and he read Shakespeare. It's kind of amazing.
Oh wow!
flawlessly,
cool.
just flawlessly read Shakespeare. It was unbelievable. It was Henry V. It's like the St. Crispin's thing. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, more and more it seems like we're getting together. I don't know. I think it's a very interesting question of like what's going to happen. I think the prediction that we're going to go back to scarcity, I think that would be great. I think that's exactly what we need, and I think that that's what you need to keep people honest. That said, I don't know. I think I don't know if we are going to go back to scarcity. I think that we maybe switched, age of Aquarius, right? We switched to this new age. And now we've got a whole new line of monsters and a whole new line of problems. And it's like it's all new. It's like we're in a new jungle, and it's like the monsters are totally different than what they were before.
I mean, what I think will definitely be different is it's not just going to be a return to scarcity, right? Because what there's going to be is it's almost like a zombie movie. It's going to be abundant capital lying around and not enough people to use it.
Capital is like machines that do things, like that type of thing.
Yeah. Land. It'll be, what would it mean if home values across the country did what they did in Detroit?
Yeah, right. Went to like zero.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that that has devastating consequences.
Yeah.
It also has opportunities. And you're going to have 10 or 15 elderly dependents to every productive worker.
You're right.
And I think the hard conversation that I'm going to have with my kids is like, you don't owe those people your life. You don't owe it to them to enslave yourself to keep them alive, because that's what it'll take. If you want to keep all those people alive, even on a basic level, eating cat food, you're going to have to enslave the productive population.
Yeah.
Totally. And my kids ain't going. We're not doing that. Right. So that's going to, I mean, it's going to be dramatically different.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Cool, man.
What a warm place to stop.
Yeah, right. No, it is. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm just waiting for the first. It just seems like we're so stagnant, and it's like there was a little blip like last year when I rejoined this whole movement of the vibe shift, and it was just a tiny little nothing, but it's like they have us so atomized and so frozen, and it's like it's so terrible, and like how it's going to be so hard once the first thing happens. I mean, Trump was arguably the first thing, but once the first big blow is struck, it's going to go very quickly, I think. But it's like we're all just waiting around kind of for like this first thing.
It takes time for people to become problem aware. It takes time for them to decide what to do about it. It takes time for them to prepare. It takes time for them to coordinate. And so like these are all the action that we're all craving is this extreme lagging indicator of people just figuring out what the hell time it is.
Yeah, right. And, which they are. I mean, they are figuring more and more, and that's what our job is to make sure that they do. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you so much, man. This was really great. Please tell us, and I'll put obviously in the notes so we have Exit, you have an Exit podcast. So like, where are all the touch points?
Yeah. So, the Exit podcast is on Spotify. It's exitgroup.us is the URL for the group. Extra Dead JCB is my Twitter account. Exit_org is the group's Twitter account. And then, exitgroup.substack.com for the newsletter. If you want to get some updates on what we're doing there, I post the podcast there as well. So
cool. Yep, and the natalist stuff is coming down the road.
TBD.
Okay.
But that'll be this year.
We won't say anything else with it. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye.